Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Automated. I, of course, am Stefan Oxmacher, your co-host and CEO and co-founder of Polymath Robotics. Sitting across from me is someone who's not at all festively garbed, despite the fact that we're recording this podcast mere minutes, mere milliseconds before our holiday party. Sir, why is it that you hate holiday parties so much? Are you, in fact, one-quartered Grinch?
Did I help organize the event today?
Yeah, but
Stefan's more of the ideas, man.
I was about to say the same. So this, of course, is Automated, our weekly podcast where we've never once missed a week, where we talk about robotics. We play a game where we make up a robot using a randomly drawn technology and business case. And then we talk about some sort of topic in robotics. And Ilia, has anything interesting happened to any large robotics program anytime recently? We're of course talking on December 11th of 2024. Robotics has been mostly dead. Nothing's really going on. No news, anything at all.
Yeah, I think, Polymath's released a new version of one of our software.
Oh, yeah.
Big deal.
We're going to spend the whole time talking about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
We could do a line-by-line code review on the podcast.
Live.
Yeah. There was another thing that happened, might be of note. You might have heard of it.
Less important, though.
Significantly less important. Cruise shut down. Cruise being, of course, the Kyle Vogt started robo-taxi company, went through Y Combinator 2013-ish, raised only like $30 million or so, bought by GM in 2016 for $550 million, had another $5 to $10 billion poured into it. At peak, employed 3,000 employees, was one of 3 companies ever in the world to deploy robo-taxis on city streets with no one in it, is now no longer working on robo-taxis.
Did you ever get a chance to ride in one of them?
Yep.
Yeah, it was pretty decent.
Yep.
I
can't do it anymore.
No, that is a limited time experience.
And with that, let's go into our game. So this is, of course, our game. We have a little Python Anywhere thing that if you can break into and add technologies to, you deserve to be able to ruin or make better. But it has picked a random technology that we have to use and a market that we have to use. And mine is saying that we have to apply ground penetrating radar to fast food.
It's a great one. Amazing.
Ilia, what's ground penetrating radar?
Yeah, so a few groups have been working on this, and it's technology adapted from the seismology field, where if you apply radar, you point it downwards, you can figure out... Radar basically works on discontinuities and density of material. If you send an electromagnetic wave, if a material has a different density than the material around it, it bounces back the wave. So if you point that at the ground, you can figure out, usually the historic use was figure out if there's a fault line under you or if there's different rock material or if you're doing oil prospecting.
That sounds really interesting and all, but why is it relevant to modern autonomous vehicles?
Yeah, so
I get that it's useful for fires in Jurassic Park, the first one, but why might someone use it today?
So in the last, let's call it, 10, 15 years, there's been a lot of work in applying radar to smaller use cases. So automotive radar for if you have lane following, that kind of stuff. And one of the thoughts is, can we use that high frequency radar, again, point it back at the ground, but try to kind of get a fingerprint of the ground underneath you? And if you have a unique fingerprint of the ground, then you're halfway to localizing yourself. If every point on the ground is unique, then if you've already mapped an area with ground penetrating radar, if you pass over it again, you know which way you're going, you know where you are very accurately.
So if, for example, some robo-taxi companies back in the 2016, 2017 era were creating ultra high definition maps of the world using LiDAR to scan everything in every block of San Francisco, they could instead theoretically just map all of the roads in San Francisco using ground penetrating radar and build a line following robot that followed that set of relatively low dimensional fingerprints as opposed to that HD map.
Yeah, I mean, you'd still want to detect other cars unless you want to drive through.
But like line following robot with obstacle detection is like a reasonable problem. Like it's still hard, and it turns out even with that method, you can still burn a lot of money and be acquired by GM and use billions of dollars and not get to millions of cars deployed. But you can build a thing that works, and ground penetrating radar could theoretically be a magical solution to solve a chunk of the many problems.
Yeah, I mean, the really useful thing from a robotics standpoint is it's not looking at the surface directly under the car. is looking at the surface several dozen feet, up to several dozen feet under the car.
Mm-hmm.
And so it doesn't matter if it's snowing or raining or sunny or night or day or whatever. The fingerprints could be the same. Unless somebody's recently built a subway tunnel exactly under where you're building.
I hate it when that happens.
Yeah, which in San Francisco takes an average of 50 to 100 years. You should be okay.
And we should call out we have good friends at the company GPR, the cleverly named ground penetrating radar company. They are what they do. But all right, so how do we use GPR, ground penetrating radar, for fast food? I think delivering fast food, that's a little passé.
Yeah.
I feel like we should do something better than food delivery with our ground penetrating radar.
Yes. I think so. Follow me in my train of thought here. Yeah. Fast food is generally not healthy. Mm-hmm. Generally not healthy food can lead to digestion issues.
Okay.
So now, connected to your sewer robot, we monitor the output, let's say, of the average household and figure out when was the last time they had fast food. And if they haven't had it recently, we have a humanoid robot break down the door and offer them discount coupons.
I was thinking something a little closer to reality and only stupid on the business case. So obviously the robotaxi companies are obviously going to exist. They're going to need mapping of all the ground penetrating radar. So we're going to strap a ground penetrating radar kit on every fast food delivery vehicle in the world to create the world's most complete HD map, ground penetrating radar map.
Yeah, I mean, you're expanding, but it's not even fast food delivery. It's like guys like Uber Eats, people who do Uber.
If they can get an extra $5 a day, by having this thing that sucks $7 an hour of power out of their alternator.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's already Uber drivers who get paid to put this like round pod on their roof to image map their neighborhoods as they're driving around. This would be a very natural extension of that.
Yeah. What's your ground penetrating radars cost?
Well, I mean,
without breaching any NDAs.
Yeah, without breaching any NDAs. I mean, this is a fairly new technology.
Yep.
Let's put it in the tens to hundreds of $1,000s was historically the cost.
But now production grade radars are hundreds of dollars.
Yeah. Well, let's call it thousands, right? Like I would say whatever a really decent LiDAR costs is something you could reasonably target for 2025 as a sane cost.
And if I want an Uber driver to be able to do a quick retrofit and add this, so I need a computer, I need a cellular uplink, I need storage, and I need a ground penetrating radar with some sort of kit that's kind of universally installable by an Uber driver who...
I think, forget the cellular kit, right? Like, this is an Uber driver anyway. So you have a little USB port and you force them to, crowdsource it. They have to take out the USB port, plug it into their laptop, and run the special Uber app on their laptop to use their home internet to upload the data. Get that little bit extra less cost. But the antennas, because it's about 77 gigahertz is the automotive on-road stuff. I'm not sure what the ground penetrating radar stuff is, probably lower frequency. But you're still talking about antennas that are in the 10 centimeters to a meter kind of ish size.
Okay.
So that's something like two laptops side by side would be about the size plate that you'd have to strap to the bottom of your car.
Okay.
And about that thickness too. So
you think you just use big magnets to hold it in place?
Yeah, magnets. Magnets are a dab of epoxy if it's slightly more permanent.
Okay.
That would work fine.
We fund these kits to give them to the Uber drivers. Let's call it $30,000 a kit.
Yep.
We need... So I know at some point in time, there was a grand total of 40,000 Ubers in the San Francisco Bay Area. Now, some of those would come in from like Sacramento and other places, but like that many might be driving at a peak period. You don't need all of those, but say like 100, 200 per city. So 100 is a nice round number times $20,000, I think I said.
Yeah.
So $20 million per city to map it.
That's actually not bad.
Yeah.
That's not bad. And the really nice part about it is that the data won't change for the next 10 to 100 years, depending how quickly you build metros.
Whereas an HD map for LiDAR might change next week.
Yeah, every time a tree is cut down or a house is changed.
I feel like this got too real. We should have done who's pooped the most recently to tell who's eating fast food.
But yeah, I think those data sets are going to be worth, I think, a reasonable amount of money.
Assuming people are building like GPR map dependent robotaxis.
Yeah, but I honestly think like ground penetrating radar is actually a pretty serious thing. I think what limits it today is the lack of maps for it. But once those are
But
built,
like, because it's deterministic, there's
Yeah.
companies who are using it
Yeah.
as a deterministic localization sensor that
exactly.
is safety certifiable.
Yeah. And once those are built, like, that is arguably the most robust sensor I could possibly think of.
Yeah.
Right?
It doesn't
Like,
have moving
it
parts.
doesn't-
It's radio
Yeah.
waves.
Yeah, no moving parts. It doesn't care about the environment. It'll give you. It's not GPS shadowed. You
Yep.
can't take it out.
Doesn't matter if someone installs a big sign.
Yeah, there's no spoofing. So if you're thinking
Yep.
about like industrial site where you're worried about an attacker trying to spoof your GPS signals, so drive your autonomous thing off a cliff, you can't even do it with ground penetrating radar. It won't happen.
Yeah.
So like all your dependence on GPS and all the issues of GPS go away pretty quickly.
So $20 million per city. This metroplex the size of the Bay Area. Let's say there's 10 of those in the U.S. So 200 million in the U.S. Call it another 400 million in Europe. 600 million. I think we're probably in the range of $2 to $4 billion to have a global relevant map of ground penetrating radar. That's
That's not bad.
Shoot.
So what are we doing after Polymath succeeds inevitably?
Ground penetrating radar on Uber driver stuff. Anyway, with that being said,
Calling it is the question.
Ground map.
Yeah, all right. Good enough.
Yeah. Whoops. I hate it when we make a real company. That's the anti-robot. So interestingly enough, me and the commercial team at Polymath were doing a not productization.
That sentence is less funny now when Stefan has a commercialization team rather than just Stefan and a whiteboard.
I'm not just talking about myself with multiple personalities.
Yeah.
We had a session to talk about kind of positioning. We've had a couple of these, but an interesting thing that came out of this is we were trying to think about, like, our customers when they buy, what are things they fear, what are things they're concerned about, some theories, business speak. But we added a section on fears between what they actually are afraid of versus what they should be afraid of. And what they should be afraid of, and almost none of them ever are, is program cancellation. And, this week, Cruise, a storied company of incredible technical merit and success, like really one of the most important robotics companies in the last 20 years, and like, the folks that would be beating them out, you could make an argument that Cruise might have been better in this way or that way, like kind of up there with anybody in basically in any way. It was announced that GM would no longer fund their development of their robotaxi business. Some of their engineers are going to be told they're working on like L2 autopilot stuff. The results of this announcement was GM's shares went up. So
I mean, the writing's been on the wall for a while.
Yes,
to be fair.
And we should
This
note
is
that
not a
Cruise
shocker.
got shut down from driver out operations in San Francisco a year and a half or so ago after they had a couple of incidents that they just fully whiffed the PR on.
Dolph.
Yeah,
Like both were missed, to be fair.
Like, I mean, I think and frankly, we had a conversation with someone we're close to the other day who 3 weeks ago would have told me would have sworn up and down to me that there is no chance in the world his program would be canceled in the next year. And just kind of learned that, the company's going to focus on some non-robot technology product that frankly already works, customers already wants, and it's just a matter of like repeating the SaaS thing that's understood. And I think in general, people in robotics almost never believe their program's cancelable. And I think if you're like kind of a dick, which I would say I am, and you look at almost any of these programs, like it's easy for us to go through the 6 steps that Cruise did wrong that led to their downfall. That would be an easy overdone podcast. I'm sure there's 14 versions of it out there. There's 15 people who predicted it a month ago or 6 years ago or whatever. That is easy. But I think what I'm interested in talking about is, why do these programs get canceled? Why do the people in them never see it coming? And what can we do to change that?
Yeah. It's not a small question. I mean, I think part of it from the engineering hubris side, like, speaking of my experience at Amazon, right? It's such a large company.
Yeah.
There's so many moving parts that there's just this sense of like the infinite money tag, right? Like there's no...
We talked about that before as well. Like when hiring people, we often run into this dilemma of they think a larger company is safe.
Yeah.
Because they're so far away from the room where the erratic decisions get made that they don't believe erratic decisions get made at a wide scale.
Not only are they far away, but there's multiple layers in between whose job it is to smooth out those control functions. Right?
This was planned many years ago.
Yeah.
That we would get rid of this. Yeah.
I mean, a good manager's job is to like stabilize chaos for their team. Like that's literally the point.
That's an interesting take.
Right. And so that they're not being nefarious. It's multiple layers of trying to stabilize chaos for their team. And so, yeah, I mean, that's part of it. I think part of it is also that there's a little bit of hubris that if anybody can solve this problem, it's this large company with this large backing, which honestly, in my experience, if applied too early, usually gets the counter result. Like robotics companies, especially in this field where there's still a lot of R&D to do, the more people you slam at the problem early, like generally the worse the solution gets.
Yeah. But if you have like 28 problems to solve at once, it is hard for a 4-person team to solve 24 novel breakthrough problems in 18 months with $500,000 of funding.
But I mean, I think even that, my argument here is like, you should be focusing on, and obviously this is not my fault, right? My original thought, but like you should be focusing on the hard. You should focus on the hard problems first. So if you're going to be doing a robotics company, focus on the things you know that are challenging in your space. So perception and navigation, just pulling examples from my experience. But like, why would you from day one spin up a user experience team for a robot that has not been built yet?
Yeah, I mean, Cruise did have a whole version of the Uber app that they built on their own with all of the same challenges of building Uber because, air quotes, we have to control the user experience.
Right, and that is not the hard part. I think everybody listening understands that Uber and Lyft and whoever put lots of money into their software. That's unquestionable. But that is not the part that requires difficult R&D, that requires good engineering, that requires software scaling, that requires customer support, all the things. But that's not the hard problem. The hard problem in Cruise's case is like, how do you navigate safely?
But I suspect having that app makes for a really good investor demo. And when you're going to the corporate stakeholders every 6 months for the next year's worth of funding, or to confirm the next year's worth of funding, that demo that they get for 2 hours of that day-long session matters a lot. We've talked before about an executive who is part of a big corporate team where he does that dog and pony show every 6 months. He gets final confirmation of the next 6 months and pending confirmation of the 6 months thereafter. And he has to do a demo for every single one of those things. So having 5 people or 50 people build an Uber app for that purpose, like the ROI makes sense there.
It does make sense. And especially in robotics, if you're looking at cutting edge problems, it's very difficult for you to define how long it's going to take to actually fix a thing.
Yeah.
And that's a terrible answer to give in a boardroom.
Yeah.
Like, how long is it going to take you to solve level 5 autonomy? I don't know. 2 years, 30, nobody has a guess, right? Like, who knows? So that's a hard thing to ask for. Just fund me indefinitely until we figure it out.
Yep.
So I get it. I don't think anybody here is being, especially at Cruise, I don't think anybody was like mustache twirling capitalist here. Like, this was strictly the right decision to make, but still, it's putting together a series of bad conditions results in a bad outcome.
I don't know if it was strictly the right decision to make.
I mean, I think GM was losing so much money with no sight line to ever stop losing so much money. Like, I'm talking from that perspective of like nobody there had a plan to dig them out of the hole.
But like, to push back on something you said about like the right thing you should focus on first and the hard thing.
Yeah.
I think another problem with human nature in general is we inherently ascribe the most value to the things that are the most difficult, but like that's wrong.
Yeah.
Like the most valuable thing here is what creates the most customer value.
Yeah.
And like there's in robotics in particular, there's this massive gulf between the stuff that sucks up all of your time and the stuff your customers give a damn about.
Oh, I totally agree with you.
I wouldn't be surprised if like Cruise's Cruise probably had one button on that version of their Uber app that was so delightful for one of those board members that he talked about it for the next three stupid meetings about what? I mean, the autonomy's great, but the fact that I can put on my smooth jazz before I even get in the vehicle, that's why I think Cruise is a winner. Like that, totally is a thing I see as being real.
So, I mean, I agree with you. I think we're talking about two different things a little bit, right? Like, one is, how do you structure a business such that you have the highest chance of success?
Yeah.
And the example I've given on this before is if you wanted to make an MVP for a bicycle, the bad engineering approach is to spend all your time on one super well-designed bicycle wheel that's super lightweight and the rest of it's made out of cardboard. Yes, engineering-wise, that's probably the right approach. But to actually build a business, you have to have a shitty bicycle to demonstrate and then talk about the good wheel. Right. But what I'm trying to say not from a business side, but from how you actually structure your team side, when you are building your great business, maybe have one dude build the frame and one dude build the gear chain assembly on your bike, and 6 people focus on the wheels instead of the opposite, right? Of
but realistically, that's probably what the organization at Cruise looked like. It was probably in the range of 2,000 engineers.
Totally.
With 20 of them building the Uber app.
Totally. And I've never worked at Cruise directly. I have no idea. But again, from my personal experience at Amazon, for example, that was not the structure at Astra, right? I think, and I've talked about this before, I think one of the sins of the program was to build out all of the support infrastructure for what an Amazon device should have before the actual Amazon device existed.
Yeah.
And having the hubris of just we build devices, so obviously we can build the robot.
So our conversation got a little off track. And we're talking about what product teams should focus on and what internal corporate exec stakeholder demos should look like. But I think that all actually comes back to why these programs get canceled.
Yeah.
Because part of the great sin of Starsky, my previous company that failed, was we only I was heads down focused on if we build a product that kind of sort of works, demonstrate that the market will pay for it. We'll of course get more money to scale that up with no investment towards stupid financier stakeholder experience. There are other robotics companies who primarily invest in stupid financier stakeholder experience who raise lots and lots and lots of money and never get anywhere. And I think part of the problem in robotics is the core product is so hard and so is such a different path of effort that needs to happen that any stupid financier stakeholder experience is at best a minor distraction that keeps the lights on, and at worst creates massive technical debt that dooms the program from the start.
Taking a step back for a more historic view on this stuff, I think you and I wouldn't be in this business if we didn't think robots could ever work. We're just not that kind of person.
Yeah.
But there's always a question of, can they work today? Are we ready? And I think that's one of the reasons we're building what we're building, is because we think there's the future to actually make this actually work as a viable business for robots in general and whatever application is to have a bunch of these vendors in different spheres, just like we have in any other industry. And we find it so weird that robotics is this strange little corner that doesn't have a million vendors for every single component.
Where instead it's build up a giant research team with unclear goals, give them a bunch of money.
I can't think, my background and my family background is they built very expensive scientific instruments, which they would sell, 100 a year.
Yeah.
And even there was a huge ecosystem of vendors building every single subcomponent, right?
Yep.
So it's very strange. Anyway, getting back to it, I think the problem with these programs at these companies is, rightly so, these large corporations are kind of doing trial runs of, is it now? Is it now? Is robots now at the point where we can run this like a normal program and not have to do all these special considerations? And the answer so far has been no.
Yeah.
And soon the answer will be yes, but nobody knows how soon.
Yep.
And I'll give one more quick story. Do you know why Blockbuster never went into video streaming? They tried. They dumped, I'm going to forget the exact number, but let's call it $1 billion.
Yeah.
Their chosen partner for network streaming was Enron. So, like, even Blockbuster knew the future was video streaming and tried and did it too early and fired the entire team and lost a ton of money and didn't get anywhere because the network infrastructure was not there.
And it likely was there, if you wasted $1 billion of your public company's money on Enron, you were not going to do video streaming again.
Yeah.
Especially because,
if he tried to bring that up forever.
Enron blew up in 98, 99?
Yes, something like that.
So it wasn't until 2008 or 2006, 2008, that there were internet companies again that people widely talked about that weren't thought of as scams.
Yeah.
The whole internet was thought of as scam factory.
Well,
I want to say until Facebook.
I mean, it was the whole .com bubble, right?
Yeah.
And again, the .com bubble, we can have a whole episode on this, but the .com bubble built out a whole bunch of network infrastructure for this demand that never came, which then meant that the vendors of the fiber optic lines and switches had to sell it at a cut rate, which actually made the real internet possible, right? The reason why you don't have to pay 5 cents to visit Facebook at the time is because a lot of money was dumped into the .com bubble.
Yeah.
And has robotics had that moment yet? I think we're in the middle of that moment right now.
We're in 2004.
Yeah.
2007.
Right? There was a ton of scams that are falling over now because interest rates are higher.
Yep.
There's still a ton of scams going on, but they're building all the expertise and people, the technologies, the techniques that then lead to an actual true renaissance.
Yeah.
But the question is that renaissance tomorrow or is it 10 years from now?
If you're a possible investor in Polymath, it's tomorrow you need to get in now. But going maybe a useful thing to end on is, or a last couple wrap up conversation to have, is how should you think about the risk of an individual program being cut? An example that I was talking about internally earlier is a good friend was working at Zoox, and we were talking to him at some point, and he said, there's no world where Zoox would go away. And this was 2002. So Zoox has actually done very well since then, but he had the viewpoint that it would be a massive hit to the entire robotics world if Zoox went out of business as a subsidiary of Amazon. Since then, Amazon has announced it was no longer going to fund Alexa.
Yeah.
Alexa, which has more money into it than Zoox does, is more relevant, is a more forward-facing device and product, and frankly, most of the time is the only other thing I can name off the top of my head that Amazon does besides sell me crap quickly. Most of the time is the only other thing I think about when it comes to Amazon. And that stopped getting funding. So
no wonder it's gotten so much worse over the last 3 months. It's
gotten
awful.
Yeah, they cut all the funding for it.
It's just, I don't know. Personal gripe, but Alexa's borderline unusable now.
I thought software just worked forever. That's why you should pay one time for it.
Yeah.
You don't need to maintain software.
Yeah, that's why even the Mars rover gets updates when it lands.
Nope, it lands and it's good forever.
Yeah.
But so maybe an exercise is we don't have to name a company in this thing, but to think about some other some robotics company and why might that program be canceled? Whether it's part of a large conglomerate, whether it's whether it's its own startup. What are reasons why a program gets canceled?
I think the main one, if I had to guess, is misaligned expectations. And we've run into this a lot when Polymath started, and we still run into sometimes of when we sell autonomy, what does autonomy actually mean?
Yep.
And we even had some Germans be very grumpy at us to say, you don't mean autonomy, you mean automated. You mean you don't mean that the thing makes its own decisions. You mean that it will follow a series of rules.
It's only autonomous if it can show up at a farm, realize what it needs to do next, go do that task, put itself away, get ready for its next task, go back out the next time.
Yeah, that's
blah,
autonomy. And I think there's a similar story here where a lot of these programs start with, technology has come a long way. Look at all these self-driving cars. Obviously, they're, from an outsider's perspective, autonomous in quotation marks, because you don't see under the hood and you see the army of engineers constantly keeping them afloat.
Yep.
Just barely ahead of them crashing.
Yep. Sometimes physically, but often software.
I'm talking about software. Yeah. And And so there's this kind of expectation of like, well, technology has come a long way. I can run microservices. I can run servers. I can spin up a website in 5 minutes. Obviously, robots are there now. So I'm going to start a program. I know it's going to be expensive. It's high tech. I need to hire some good people. But like, if I spend 3 or 4 years on it, I'm going to have a product that we can start selling. And after that, yeah, we have to maintain it, but like, it'll be a tenth the cost.
Yep.
And it is just not where robots are today, fundamentally.
Yep.
And we're trying to get them there.
Yeah.
Part of what we're trying to do is try to get them there, but we're not there yet. And I think that misalignment of expectations means that when you're at the 3 or 4 year mark, and realistically the 5 or 6 year mark,
yep,
and you've blown past all your deadlines, and you're not even close to this vision of autonomy, much less a functional product, that's when the rubber hits the road.
I remember a senior commercial executive at Cruise telling me in 2020 that the engineering team gives me all this gruff, but I tell them this system needs to work anywhere in the world under any weather condition in the next 6 months. And I thought at that moment, either you're going to get fired in 6 months, or you might bring the company down single-handedly, given your level of seniority. So the misalignment of expectations is one thing, but I think there's more to that. I think robotics have a certain sheen on it that goes away when you start to learn just how hard it is.
Yeah.
And just how easy other things are. Like at Starsky, a thing that I could never really convince investors was solving all off-highway autonomy was worth less money to us than better negotiation of freight rates using Boolean logic when we're accepting bids from freight brokers. Of you want to hire us for $2.20 a mile, we're counter offering at $2.60 and we'll settle for $2.40, was worth more than AG.
Yeah.
And frankly speaking, for a lot of businesses, software that is everywhere in e-commerce is transformative for them. And I think that's a nasty reality. But most of them will only get introduced to that software, frankly, through robotics. I think there's other hot things to work on, whether it's just software like that, whether it's the newest AI craze or the newest humanoid craze, or whatever, or drones, or Bitcoin for some reason, or whatever, is going to suck the air out of the room. And if your company needs that hype to live, you will die when someone either cares more about dollars than hype, or the hype goes elsewhere.
And even if you are at one of these large programs, I think one of the main things to think about is there a clear vision where the product is no longer requires that army of engineers, where you can actually start having a real dollar
not even
positive
vision.
return?
I think if you don't see, I think if the company does not have a sub 24-month roadmap to how they could theoretically be profitable, you're at the risk of the greater business jerk.
Yeah.
I often get told by people that of course Google will do this forever. Of course Google has so much money, but I don't know. Google recently got told they might have to sell Chrome. Who knows if that decision stands the test of January 20th or whatever of next year, but let's say it does. And suddenly Google needs to shore up their finances. Getting rid of a $5 billion a year cost center is a pretty easy way to get yourself a $50 million bonus. And those aren't made up numbers.
That's a very real
that's
number.
if I was
how dedicated would you have to be to robotics to turn down a $50 million paycheck to kill a relatively minor piece of the entire robotics ecosystem?
Yeah. Or frankly,
I don't know if
sell
I would
it to a third party.
Yeah, I don't know if I would be able to resist that.
A third party who can say to my face that, they'll certainly keep it going.
Yeah.
They'll, this consortium of investors will totally keep this alive.
Yeah.
And they really are into it. Meanwhile, I'll get vacation houses 6 through 13 and probably a new face.
You have to.
My wife's been telling me I could use one.
Oh, I thought you were making a joke about hiding from healthcare CEOs. But too dark.
Yeah.
Too dark.
That should be our next robot that we make up. Humanoids for...
No. We're not weaponizing our robots. But yeah, I think that's... So to summarize, actually, if you want to find out if a program is real, my argument is ask how many employees per robot the company has.
Yeah.
That's the real, if the number is
and what the near-term trajectory is.
Exactly. That might not be a great number today, but if you need 50 people to manage every robot you have deployed, there is no amount of money you could pay for that robot that would make that make sense.
Yeah.
Like even extremely expensive surgical robots like Demise do not have those ratios.
Yeah.
And they make good money and they're a real company.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that.
And like, and frankly speaking, how many miracles are between you and that economic inevitability?
I think that correlates. I think that correlates, right? Like if you have 12 miracles you need to solve, you need 100 people on each one.
Yeah.
And like, there's your number.
So to close this out, we had another interesting commercial conversation we had recently. Our commercial director, Robert, who just joined us, who's great, told me that when he was in B school, the basic kind of MBA math is that when you buy hardware or you buy some fixed good that holds its value, the value of that thing you're buying is about a third of how much ROI it brings you.
Okay.
Like, you want to get something that like triples its worth.
Okay.
Because if I buy this plot of land and this land makes me $1 million, $330,000 for it is great.
It's fine.
That's what I should be targeting. I shouldn't pay $900. There's some risk. $100 would be a steal. Now, like IT implementations are risky. And it's a fun fact. 50 to 80% of ERP implementations fail. So we've been implementing NetSuite and Oracle for 25 to 50 years, depending on which of those two softwares. 50 to 80% of those implementations do not work, do not take. Because of that higher risk rate. And
are just a straight loss.
Yeah. Because of that risk rate, they have to 10x. They're basically, it's a third against that 1/3 of buying, land. So it needs to be a 10x value. I would argue robots, especially new programs built in-house, have a much lower success rate than NetSuite implementations. And there's too many of those programs whose idealistic numbers are not compelling enough to justify the risk, so that the second the sheen comes off the program, it's time to cut it.
Yeah. Or alternatively, you're in a program which is a pure R&D tax dodge or marketing effort or whatever, which is fine too, right? Like for a long time,
tax dodges are fine.
No, well, like for a long time,
there was a lot of value ascribed to Ilia's statement of tax dodge.
Yeah,
that was not an accounting like, oh, here's how you get a whatever. No, was that those programs are crap.
No. I just mean like for a while, Google would fund practically any crazy idea because they were making so much money. It was causing them problems that their balance sheet looked the way it
wasn't just tax dodge. You're obviously a monopoly when you have 90% margins.
Exactly.
So you spend a lot of money on self-driving cars to make yourself only have a 30% margin.
Exactly. So, call it what you will, but, and that's fine too. Like go, Xerox is famous for having Park that was for years and years and years and developed a lot of very cool things, but never made any money. And as a pure business person, it's like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Until you realize like, oh, like that's why maybe printer cartridges cost $300 for 10 cents worth of stuff.
So at the end of the day, the question is, your company most likely relies on the good graces of people upstairs, unless there is a sub 24-month path towards it being a profitable venture.
Yep.
Which probably means greater than 10x returns.
Yep. Good luck.
Yep. I think I just got an email from our collective listener base. The last reported by Spotify is 250 million people listening to every episode. 0 bots.
Seems a little low.
That says, this is awkward. I'm switching to AI.
I'm switching to a more positive podcast. Less gripey people.
Thanks so much for doing this podcast with us. What's our next topic about?
Well, for a few weeks for holidays.
We never miss a week. What are you talking about?
Yeah, that's right.
We just stack these episodes and we don't release them because they're too exciting.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's definitely what we do.
So if you don't hear a podcast from us next week or the week of Christmas or the week of the New Year, it's because we sent them to everyone besides you.
And then CES.
But have a wonderful holiday season, a happy New Year, and a fantastic CES where you should stop by our booth.
Yeah, stop by our booth at CES. We'd love to hear from our listeners. It's always a joy to meet someone at a conference who recognizes us and talks to us.
I never feel more full of myself outside of when I meet someone who says they listen to this podcast or when I talk to Mike Judge.
I was going to say, I was literally about to say, didn't you just talk to Mike Judge?
Yeah, we're best friends now. He told me. He promised.
All right.
Yeah, we're best friends forever.
But yeah, definitely stop by. And
I started sending him letters saying we're biffles, but I got a threatening letter.
From his lawyer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
humanoid robot threatened him. But yeah, if we don't see you, talk to you in about 4 weeks. See you next time.